The first time I stepped onto that court, I didn't just feel stares, I felt judgment. It wasn't because I was new or because I came from a place no one could pinpoint on a map. It was the color of my skin. There was something unspoken in the air that whispered, "You don't belong here." And maybe I didn't. But before the first serve, before the first applause, someone said something I'll never forget. "You're too black for tennis." It was in that moment that everything changed. People think tennis is a classy sport, quiet, polite, beautiful. But for me, tennis was a war zone. Every match was a battle against more than just an opponent on the other side of the net. It was against the system, the crowd, the media, and the voice in my head that started sounding a lot like theirs. I wasn't born into country clubs. I didn't wear white skirts and smile for magazines. My skin was too dark, my body too strong, my voice too loud. And because of that, I wasn't welcome. They didn't just doubt my skill, they doubted my place in the sport at all. But I stayed. I trained when no one was watching. I listened to every insult, every backhanded compliment, every commentator who said I wasn't the right image for tennis. This story isn't about pity. It's not about revenge. It's about what happens when you refuse to shrink just to make other people comfortable. It's about the moment they realized they couldn't ignore me anymore, because my talent was louder than their hate. And if you've ever felt too different, too judged, or too not enough for the world around you, then this story is for you. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments. Where are you watching this from? Your city and country might get a shout out in our next story. And if this already speaks to your heart, hit that subscribe, tap the like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I didn't grow up hearing the sound of bouncing tennis balls or the polite applause of country club crowds. I grew up hearing sirens, stray dogs barking, and the occasional neighbor shouting through cracked windows. My court mat was cracked too, literally. Faded white lines on concrete, a rusted fence with a hole big enough for kids to crawl through. I was 5 years old the first time I held a racket. It wasn't mine, it wasn't new, and it definitely wasn't made for someone like me. My dad got it from a garage sale 3 blocks over. It had duct tape around the handle and strings that buzzed when the ball hit them. He smiled like he had just handed me a sword. He said, "You won't need a new one until this one breaks, and even then we'll just fix it." We didn't have money. We had imagination. And I had something even more dangerous: focus. My older sister, she was the golden one. Calm, graceful. Everyone said she had the look. I was the opposite. Too loud, too impatient, and apparently, too dark. The first time we showed up at a junior program outside our neighborhood, the coach didn't even speak to me. He looked at my sister, smiled, and said, "Now that one looks like a real player." I stood there, holding the same racket, wearing the same shoes, breathing the same air, and still invisible. That day, something small cracked inside me, and what I didn't know yet was that it would never fully heal. But I didn't quit. I trained harder. I copied my sister's every move. I learned from the wall when no one would rally with me. I'd hit the ball again and again until my knuckles blistered. That wall became my first coach. And every time I hit the ball, I imagined it was the face of every person who had looked through me. But nothing could prepare me for the moment I'd hear it out loud for the first time. The thing they whispered. The thing they thought I was too young to understand. We were at a youth tournament. I had just won my first match ever. The score was 6-2, 6-1. I walked past a group of parents in the bleachers, excited to find my dad. That's when I heard it. 2 women talking in low voices, one of them laughing softly. "She's good, but she's too black for tennis. You know they'll never let her go far." I froze. I didn't turn around. I didn't cry. I just let those words sink so deep, they became part of my story. That night I didn't eat. I sat on the couch with my racket in my lap. staring at the frayed grip like it could answer every question swirling in my head. Was it true? Was I already disqualified no matter how good I got? But what my dad said that night would become the first brick in the foundation of who I was becoming. And I had no idea how much I'd come to lean on that brick later. There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy, loaded, like 1,000 opinions being swallowed at the same time. That's the silence I met when I walked into my first elite tennis camp. The building smelled like sunscreen and filtered water. Everything was white: walls, floors, uniforms. Even the voices sounded clean. And then there was me. Black skin, beaded braids, a second-hand bag, and a last name no one there bothered to pronounce right. They didn't need to say it out loud. I could feel it in every quiet stare that lingered too long. During orientation, the instructor skipped my name 3 times. When I raised my hand, he blinked, then said, "Oh, you're the wild card entry." He didn't say welcome. He didn't say glad you're here. He said wild card, like I was some kind of mistake in the system. And that's when I realized, sometimes the loudest insults are delivered in silence. The other girls formed their circles quickly. They braided each other's hair, laughed about their vacations, compared rackets and trainers. I sat on the edge of a bench, tying and untying my laces, pretending I didn't want to be part of that world. One of the girls, Rachel, looked at me once and whispered something to the blonde next to her. They laughed. Not the kind of laugh that includes you, the kind that cuts. That night I called my dad. I didn't want to cry, but my voice cracked when I said, "I don't think they want me here." He stayed quiet for a long time, then finally said, "They're not supposed to want you there. You're supposed to scare them." That stayed with me. I started to wonder, what if being too black for tennis wasn't the weakness they thought, but the strength I hadn't discovered yet? The next morning, I got up before sunrise. While they slept, I hit the wall outside the dorms. Hundreds of balls. No coach, no praise. Just rhythm, pain, and a quiet promise to myself. You will not leave this place invisible. By the 3rd day, I started winning drills. By the 5th, I was beating the girls who ignored me. And by the end of the week, they finally said my name right. But not because they respected me, because they couldn't ignore me anymore. At the final evaluation, the head coach called me in. He looked at my scores, then looked at me and said, "You surprised a lot of people here, but if you want to go further, you'll need to learn how to tone yourself down." Tone myself down. That phrase echoed louder than every silent stare from the week before. It wasn't my game that needed adjusting. It was their idea of who was allowed to win. I walked out of that room with my fists clenched, not in anger, in purpose, because I finally understood. They didn't want me to succeed quietly. They wanted me to fit quietly. And I wasn't built for that. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, fists clenched under the blanket. My roommates whispered, giggled, watched videos on their phones. I just listened, not to them. To that sentence that wouldn't stop echoing in my mind. Tone yourself down. He didn't mean my voice. He meant my fire, my power. He meant my blackness. And that was the moment I knew. They were okay with me being good, as long as I didn't shine too bright. I remembered something my mom used to say when I was little and angry at the world. They fear what they can't control. Maybe I was never meant to be welcomed. Maybe I was meant to walk into rooms and make people uncomfortable, because comfort never changed anything. That week didn't make me feel accepted, but it made me dangerous, because now I knew exactly what they were trying to protect. They weren't afraid I wouldn't fit in. They were afraid I'd rise above. Before I left, I walked back onto the court one last time, early in the morning, while it was still dark. I stood there alone in the middle of that perfect white-lined rectangle and whispered a promise so soft only the court could hear it. You're going to remember my name, not because I toned it down, but because I turned it up. Coming back from that camp, I thought things would get easier. They didn't. What changed wasn't the world. It was me. I had learned to hear racism even when no one said a word. I had learned that silence could be just as sharp as an insult. I had learned that attention wasn't always applause. When I walked into local tournaments now, people noticed. Not with joy, not with curiosity, with tension. They saw a girl who wasn't supposed to be there, a girl who had dared to show up and win, and that scared them more than anything, because I wasn't invisible anymore. And for some people, a black girl with confidence is the most dangerous thing in the room. I began to feel the shift in little things. My name was often mispronounced during match announcements. My warm-ups were interrupted by random checks. Parents of white players asked for their daughters to be moved to different brackets. Coaches glanced at me and quickly looked away. Once my racket was mysteriously misplaced minutes before a quarterfinal. No one knew who took it. No one cared. I had to borrow one from a stranger. That wasn't an accident. That was a message. There was one official, Mr. Callahan, who made it personal. He watched me like I was cheating with every step. He gave me warnings no one else received. And during a semi-final match, he accused me of intimidating my opponent, just because I grunted too loudly on serves. He pulled me aside and said, "If you want to play here again, tone it down. This isn't the ghetto." I stood there, heart pounding in my chest. Not because I was scared, but because I knew I couldn't afford to react. That was the cost of being visible. You could never show them how much it hurt. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry, but I swallowed it all. Because if I broke, they would win. And I wasn't playing for trophies anymore. I was playing for something bigger. At school, it wasn't any easier. Girls whispered behind my back. Some mocked my hair, others mocked my walk. One day, someone left a banana peel in my locker. No name, no note, just the peel. They didn't need words. They knew I'd understand. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom. I didn't want my parents to see me cry. I stared at the mirror and asked myself, is it worth it? Is this what success feels like? But then I thought about every time I won a point, every time the crowd went quiet, every time the girl on the other side of the net realized I wasn't just there to play, I was there to dominate. And I made a decision. If they wanted me quiet, I'd get louder. If they wanted me to shrink, I'd grow stronger. If they wanted me gone, they'd have to watch me rise. They weren't trying to break my game. They were trying to break my spirit. And that was the one thing they couldn't touch. My game improved. I started winning consistently, but the praise didn't come. Not the kind they gave others. Reporters described me as explosive, aggressive, animalistic. But when white players got passionate, they were driven, fierce, focused. One day, a magazine ran a feature on the tournament. There were 10 photos of the top players. I had just won the whole damn thing. I wasn't in a single picture, not even one. That's when it hit me. It wasn't about whether I was good enough. It was about whether they were willing to see me at all. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. Typed. No signature. Just 5 words on a blank page. You will never belong here. I read it. Then I folded it, and I placed it under my racket string case. Not to keep the pain, but to remind myself, belonging was never my goal. Winning was. But even winning started to feel lonely. I'd walk off the court with sweat on my face and a medal in my bag, only to sit alone in the bleachers while everyone else celebrated. No teammates, no media requests, no congratulations that felt real. That's when I realized, being visible didn't mean being accepted. It just meant being watched. One time, after winning a state-level tournament, I stood next to the second-place girl on the podium. She was crying. I put my hand on her shoulder, like we were taught to do in sportsmanship training. She pulled away and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Get off me." There were gasps in the audience. The judge paused, and then he gave her a tissue. No one said anything to me, not one word. I left that podium with a trophy in my hand and a knot in my throat. It wasn't just what she said. It was how the silence afterward made it acceptable. That night, my mom hugged me tight and said, "You're not alone, baby. You're just ahead." At the time, I didn't know what she meant. Now I do. The higher I climbed, the colder it got. Every time I broke through another ranking, the air thinned. I started getting less invitations to events, fewer interviews. Even when I played better than everyone else, my name came last, if it came at all. That's when I began to understand something deeper. Visibility without support is exposure. But here's the twist they didn't expect. I didn't break. I didn't burn out. I got sharper. Every snub made my footwork cleaner. Every insult made my serve stronger. Every door that closed made me build my own. And then came the scout. He stood at the back of the court after one of my matches. Didn't say a word. Just watched. He wore all black and had a clipboard tucked under his arm like it held the future. After I won 6-0, he finally walked up to me. "You don't play like you're trying to prove something," he said. "You play like they already owe you." That's when I smiled, because he was right. They did owe me. Not respect, not fairness, just the truth. Success makes noise, but in my case, it created silence. The higher I rose, the quieter things got. Not in the locker room, but in the way people talked about me. Or rather, how they didn't. After I won a national junior title, my photo didn't appear on the tournament's official website. There was a post congratulating the runner-up, but no mention of me. A coach from another region walked past me the next day and said, "Hey, that was a great match you played. Real shame the site missed it." He smiled, but not the kind of smile you give someone you're proud of, the kind you give someone you're afraid of. That's when I realized, erasure isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet strategy. I wasn't ignored because I wasn't good. I was ignored because I was undeniable, and that made me inconvenient. Other players were invited to speak at youth clinics. They were featured in newsletters, articles, interviews. They were called promising, elegant, the future. I was called intense, physical, different. One reporter wrote, "She brings power but not the finesse of a traditional champion." What he meant was, she doesn't fit the mold. At one tournament, I walked into the press tent after a win. A small group of journalists looked up, then went back to their phones. I stood there, waiting. No one said a word. I had just made history, and they acted like it didn't happen. Later, I watched a clip from the post-match coverage. They called the tournament one of the most surprising finals in years. They praised my opponent for holding her own against someone so unorthodox. Unorthodox, that's what they called me. I started to notice patterns. If I smiled after a win, they said I was cocky. If I didn't, they said I was cold. If I yelled, I was aggressive. If I stayed calm, I lacked passion. No matter how I moved, it was the wrong way. One evening, after a particularly difficult tournament, I walked out into the parking lot alone. The sun was setting. My body ached. My legs trembled. And still, I had won. But no one was there. No cameras. No handshake from the organizers. No acknowledgement that anything had happened at all. I sat on the curb with my racket bag, watching other players pile into SUVs with their teams, coaches, and praise. And that's when the tears came, not because I lost anything, but because I realized I had to carry all of it alone. Winning as a black girl in tennis didn't feel like victory. It felt like surviving a system designed to pretend you're not there. The silence became heavier than the insults, because at least when someone says something cruel, you know where you stand. But silence, it makes you question if you even exist in their world. And that kind of doubt can kill even the strongest passion. I went home and thought about quitting, for real this time, not out of weakness, out of exhaustion. I loved tennis, but I hated how it made me feel like I had to apologize for winning. Like every point I earned came with an invisible asterisk. Every victory met with discomfort. Every presence met with protocol. But just before I gave in, something happened. Something that pulled me back from the edge. It was a letter, not anonymous this time. Handwritten, folded in half, slipped through the cracks of my locker door. It said, "You don't know me, but I've watched you play. I'm a brown girl with a racket who thought she didn't belong. Now I think maybe I do, because you do." I read it over and over again, and I cried harder than I ever had before, because in all that silence, I hadn't realized someone was listening. I wrote back, even though I didn't know where to send it. They tried to make me invisible, but you reminded me that I was never playing just for me. That single letter reminded me why I started. It reminded me that every time I stepped on that court, I wasn't just playing to win. I was playing so that some girl somewhere could believe she deserved to hold a racket too. They could silence the room, but they couldn't silence the impact. You never forget the day everything shifts. Not because of the trophy, not because of the applause, but because you walk off the court and realize the world finally saw you, or at least pretended to. It was the finals of a regional circuit. Nothing glamorous, nothing broadcast on national TV. But for me, it was the first time I was allowed center court. Not because they wanted me there, but because they had no choice. I'd been tearing through the brackets, match after match, silencing the ones who whispered, "She won't make it past round one." The girl I was up against had a reputation, ranked higher, sponsors, a classic tennis beauty, the one with the ponytail, soft tone, flawless etiquette. We warmed up side by side. She looked at me once, then smirked and said, "I hope you don't mind losing in straight sets. I've got dinner reservations." That line stuck to my skin like a slap, but I didn't answer, because I didn't come to argue. I came to expose. When the game started, she hit clean, fluid, but I hit hard, furious. There was no finesse in my swings, just focus. I chased every ball like it owed me something, like every step was a rebellion, every point, a page in a story they never wanted written. By the end of the first set, the crowd started shifting. They weren't clapping for her anymore. They were murmuring. By the second set, she was grunting, slipping, her face red with frustration. Mine, steady. I'd stopped looking at her. I was playing against everything that ever told me I didn't belong. And what no one expected was how personal this game became. Midway through the second set, I hit an overhead smash so fierce it clipped the edge of the baseline. She turned to the umpire and challenged it. "Out!" she yelled, pointing. But the mark was there, clear. The umpire said, "The point stands." She threw her hands in the air and snapped, "Are you blind?" The crowd gasped. That moment was when I knew. She wasn't losing to me. She was losing to what I represented. I closed out the match 6-3, 6-1, no screaming celebration, no fist pump. I just stood there, sweat dripping, heart pounding. And for the first time, I saw the entire room look directly at me, not past me, not through me, at me. A reporter approached me outside the court. He asked, "How does it feel to finally prove yourself?" I looked him in the eye and said, "I didn't prove anything today. I've always been this player. You just finally noticed." He didn't write that quote, of course not. He wrote, "Unexpected champion stuns crowd with raw athleticism." They still couldn't say I deserved it, only that it was unexpected. Still, something had changed. My name started appearing in articles, short mentions, backhanded compliments, careful phrasing, but it was there. Visibility had a cost, but invisibility had cost me far more. That night, my dad took me out for burgers. We didn't talk about the match. Instead, he looked at me and said, "You're not the underdog anymore. You're the standard, and they'll do everything to keep you from realizing that." I sat with that for a long time. Because when you're the underdog, you're underestimated. But when you become the threat, you're targeted. The next morning, I opened my phone to dozens of comments. Some were praise, some were venom, too aggressive. Not real tennis. She looks like she belongs on a basketball court. And then one comment stood out. She's a beast, total animal. The word burned, because they didn't mean beast like powerful. They meant it like less than human. I put my phone down, sat in silence, and realized winning didn't protect me. It just changed the angle of the attack. But I wasn't afraid, because now I had proof. Proof that my game was stronger than their prejudice. Proof that I could dominate without shrinking. Proof that I could force them to say my name even if their mouths were full of bias. I replayed the match in my mind all week, not to relive the win, but to memorize the feeling of owning the court, of not asking permission, of playing like I belonged, because I did. And the craziest part? That was only the beginning. Being seen is a strange kind of victory. It's what I wanted, what I trained for, what I bled for. But no one tells you that being seen also makes you a target. After that breakthrough game, things changed, but not the way I thought they would. Yes, there was recognition. My name appeared in more headlines. Coaches started nodding at me in the hallway instead of pretending I wasn't there. I was interviewed for a podcast, a small feature, but still something. And then the messages started. Not from fans, from sponsors. They weren't offering deals, they were offering suggestions. We love your intensity. Have you considered a more neutral hairstyle for your next event? We see your passion, maybe smile more. It softens your image. You're strong, but strength can be intimidating to the average viewer. Let's talk about balance. Every word was coated in sugar, and every sentence was a leash. For the first time, I felt the weight of visibility. Because when you're invisible, they ignore you. But when you're visible, they try to shape you. My clothes, my hair, my tone, my blackness. Suddenly, it was all negotiable. And the most painful part? They framed it as a compliment. You could be a role model if you toned it down just a little. There's a market for someone like you if you play it right. I found myself staring in the mirror before matches, wondering, was this shirt too loud? Was this hairstyle too urban? Should I speak less in interviews? I had become fluent in self-editing, not to survive matches, but to survive their expectations. Then came the headline that broke me. One site published an article titled, "The Face of Grit, Tennis's Most Intense Young Star." At first I smiled, then I read the first paragraph. While not traditionally graceful, her power game compensates for a lack of elegance. Her aggressive style may not be for everyone, but it's undeniably effective. That word again, aggressive, never strategic, never tactical, never driven, just aggressive. I showed it to my coach. He shrugged. They're noticing you. That's what matters. But is it? Is it really? Because being noticed isn't the same as being respected. I remember standing alone after practice one night, looking at the court lights flickering in the distance. And I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to before. Is the price of being seen becoming someone I'm not? The answer came a few days later. At a panel event for junior athletes, I was asked to speak. I wore a muted outfit, tied my hair back, practiced safe answers. I delivered every line perfectly, polished, professional. And when it was over, a young black girl, maybe 12, came up to me with her mom. She looked at me, then at the flyer, then back at me again, and said quietly, "You don't look like the girl in the videos." That hit harder than any opponent ever had, because she was right. In trying to become marketable, I had become invisible again. But what cut deeper was her mother's face. She gave me a polite smile like she wanted to be grateful, but I saw it in her eyes. Disappointment. Not in me, in what I'd been turned into. That moment haunted me for days. I couldn't stop thinking about how many girls like her were watching, searching for a version of themselves only to find a filtered outline that had been edited into comfort for someone else. That night, I opened my journal, and instead of writing notes about my footwork or match strategy, I wrote one sentence over and over again. "You are not here to make them comfortable." I read it aloud, again and again, until it felt like a new beat in my chest, until I believed it. No more shrinking, no more adjusting the volume of my voice, no more smoothing the edges of my joy or rage or pride. If I was too much for them, maybe they were never meant to carry someone like me. And maybe I wasn't meant to be carried at all. I was meant to walk, run, dominate on my own 2 feet. From that point on, I reclaimed it all. That hit harder than any opponent ever had, because she was right. In trying to become marketable, I had become invisible again. That night, I made a decision. I would never hide again. If they wanted my strength, they'd get it. If they wanted my fire, they'd feel it. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one they couldn't rewrite. From that point on, I reclaimed it all. My hair, my voice, my walk into the arena, the way I celebrated after a win. I wore colors that screamed. I spoke with conviction. I played like I was writing scripture on every line of the court. And I stopped apologizing for how much space I took up. Yes, the attacks got louder. Yes, the scrutiny got sharper. But so did my purpose. Because I wasn't just playing for a title anymore. I was playing for permission. For every black girl who was told to shrink. The world didn't have to like me. But they would see me, fully, boldly, unapologetically. It was supposed to be just another match, not for the title, not for a sponsorship, just a mid-season qualifier on a cold Thursday afternoon. But sometimes, the match that changes your life doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, like an ambush. I was up against a girl named Dana, ranked number 3 in the state, private coach, elite academy, family that flew in just to watch her warm up. And me? I took a bus, alone. I carried 2 rackets in a worn bag and a quiet rage I'd been storing for years. No one picked me to win. Not the officials, not the crowd, not even the guy announcing names. He mispronounced mine again, even after correcting him twice. The first few minutes were brutal. Dana was fast, clean, powerful. She moved like the court belonged to her. Me? I was tight, hesitant. And every time I looked up, I saw them watching. Not like spectators, but like judges. Measuring, comparing, dismissing. I could hear murmurs during warm-ups. Parents talking in low tones, coaches shaking their heads. One of them even said out loud, not knowing I was within earshot, "She's athletic, but raw. This won't take long." I lost the first set 6-2. During the break, I sat with a towel over my head, not to dry sweat, but to hide the shame. I could feel their voices in my chest. "She doesn't belong here. This is out of her league." It was cute that she made it this far. But then I heard another voice. My father's. "They're not supposed to want you there. You're supposed to scare them." I took a breath, unwrapped the towel, and walked back onto that court like I had nothing left to lose. Because honestly, I didn't. The second set was different. I stopped trying to play her game and made her play mine. Long rallies, angles she didn't expect, pace changes that threw off her rhythm. I wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but I had something she didn't. Pain. Pain that had been sculpted into discipline, turned into strategy, sharpened into instinct. Every ball I returned carried a memory. The hallway laughs, the skipped introductions, the fake compliments from sponsors, the quiet stares. Every swing was a refusal to shrink again. Midway through the set, Dana yelled at her coach. She wasn't used to someone not backing down, not someone like me. I took the second set 6-4. The crowd shifted, no longer amused, now confused. Who is she? Where did she come from? How is this happening? And I smiled, because that was the point. They didn't see me coming. Third set. Final decider. We were tied 5-5. My legs were aching, my lungs burned, blisters on both feet, racket strings starting to fray. But I wasn't tired. I was alive. Because for the first time, I was playing for me. Not to prove something. Not to be accepted. Just to play the damn game the way I was born to. I remembered every late night at the public courts. Every time I hit balls against a brick wall with no one watching. Every voice that told me I was dreaming too loud. And I knew. This was my answer to all of them. Dana double faulted. Match point. I bounced the ball 3 times, looked up at the stands. No one was cheering. Not yet. And that was perfect, because they hadn't believed in me from the start. And I didn't need them to. I served. Ace. Down the tee. Match over. I didn't scream. I didn't fall to my knees. I didn't throw my racket in celebration. I just stood there, breathing, letting the silence do what it had never done before. Speak for me. No interview afterward, no feature article, no viral headline, just a few claps, some polite nods. And then, like always, the world moved on. But as I walked to the locker room, a girl, maybe 16, ran up to me. Black, beaded braids. Same shoes I wore when I was her age. She didn't say much, just held out a notepad and asked for an autograph. When I signed, she whispered, "You made me want to play again." That was the real win, because trophies gather dust, but moments like that, they echo. A victory was supposed to open doors. Instead, it drew tighter lines around me. The day after that match, I walked into the training center expecting nods, maybe even a little respect. But what I got was silence. Not the heavy silence of judgment I'd known before. This was colder, more intentional. People stopped making eye contact. Coaches avoided my court during drills. One girl I'd beaten in practice whispered something to Dana in the locker room, and they both looked at me like I'd broken some unspoken rule. And maybe I had, because I'd done more than win. I'd disrupted the hierarchy. The director of the program called me into her office later that week. Polite smile, folded hands. She complimented my progress, said I showed potential. And then she said something that stuck like a thorn under the skin. "We just want to make sure you're representing the club appropriately, on and off the court." I blinked. "What do you mean by that?" She adjusted her glasses. "We've received feedback that some of your on-court behavior has been intense." Intense? I didn't curse. Didn't celebrate disrespectfully. I just won. Clean. But suddenly my passion was aggressive. My confidence was threatening. My presence, too loud. That night, I stayed late to practice. When I got to court 6, my usual court, there was a new sign posted, "Closed for maintenance." Funny, it had looked just fine yesterday. Every other court was booked solid, except court 12. The one behind the trash bins with cracked lines and half-lit lights. That's where I practiced. Alone, in the dark. And even in that darkness, I saw it clearly. Winning wasn't enough. Not when the system you're in was never designed for you to rise. A week later, I found my name missing from the list for the regional exhibition tournament. Every player who qualified was there, even girls I'd beaten. I walked up to the coordinator, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, I think there's a mistake. My name's not on the roster." She looked down, clicked a few times, then said, "Oh, there was a committee decision to reallocate spots based on sponsor visibility." Sponsor visibility? I stared at her. "I qualified on points. That's the rule." She shrugged. "Sometimes exceptions are made." Mini cliffhanger. I opened my mouth to argue, but then I saw who was standing behind her, Dana, with her father, smiling. That night, I didn't practice. I sat in my room staring at the ceiling, feeling like all the air had been drained out of the world. I had done everything right. I had worked harder than anyone. I had won when no one expected me to. And still, they found a way to erase it. I almost packed my bags that night. Almost. But then I remembered that girl, the one who asked for my autograph after the match. Her eyes, her voice, the way she said, "You made me want to play again." I couldn't let her down. I couldn't let me down, so I stayed. The next morning I arrived at the courts before anyone else, not to hit balls, but to leave a message. I took a thick black marker, and on the wall of Court 12, the broken one, I wrote, "You can take my matches, you can take my spotlight, but you will never take my fire." When the coaches arrived, they made me scrub it off. But it was too late, because everyone had already seen it. Word spread. Some players started watching my drills again. A few even asked to train with me. Not the top seeds, no, but the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones who saw a little of themselves in me. I didn't become the face of the club, but I became something more dangerous. A spark. And sparks don't need permission to light a fire. It happened on a rainy Wednesday. Most of the players had left the court early. Too wet, too messy. But I stayed. Because when you're used to playing in the margins, you don't wait for perfect conditions. I was practicing serves, just me and the bounce of the ball echoing off the wet concrete, when I noticed her. An older woman. Umbrella tilted, jacket soaked at the edges. Watching, not smiling, not nodding, just watching. After 20 minutes, I turned to leave. That's when she approached. "Your power comes from more than your arm." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She stepped closer. "You play like someone who's survived something." I didn't know how to respond, because no coach had ever said something like that. Most wanted technique, metrics, obedience. She wanted something else. She handed me a card. "If you're ready for a place that sees that fire, call me." Then she left, just like that. That night, I stared at the card for hours. Not because I doubted her offer, but because I doubted myself. Her name was Coach Elena Cruz, former pro, known for training outliers, players who didn't fit. Her academy wasn't flashy, no brand deals, no endorsement banners, but the players who came through it, they didn't just play tennis, they played free. I didn't call her for 3 days, not because I didn't want to, but because the fear was loud again. What if I'm just being invited to fail somewhere else? What if I don't belong there either? On the 4th day, I dialed the number. She answered on the first ring. "Took you long enough." We didn't talk about stats, she didn't ask for footage, she just said, "Be here Monday, bring sneakers and truth." When I arrived, the academy was smaller than I expected. 3 courts, no fancy gym, just a shed with weights, a wall full of scuffed rackets, and a big sign at the entrance. "You don't need permission to be powerful." That first session broke me. Elena didn't start with footwork or serves. She started with silence. "Before you hit a ball," she said, "I want you to say out loud why you play." I froze. No one had ever asked me that. Not really. And when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. Not at first. But then I whispered, "Because they said I couldn't." She nodded. Now louder. "Because they said I couldn't." Again. "Because they said I couldn't." "Good," she said. "Now let's show them why they were wrong." What followed wasn't training. It was transformation. Elena taught me how to unlearn, not just bad habits, but shame. I'd spent so long trying to be accepted. I forgot what it felt like to be unapologetic. She tore down the walls I'd built to protect myself. "You're not here to make them comfortable," she said one morning. "You're here to change the shape of the game." We worked 6 days a week, mornings on the court, afternoons reviewing tapes, evenings writing reflections, no shortcuts, no compromises, only fire. 3 weeks in, she handed me a sealed envelope. Inside, a wildcard invitation to a national-level qualifier. Bigger stage, tougher players, real scouts, and one line scribbled in her handwriting. They won't expect you. That's your power. But stepping onto that court again meant facing everything I had tried to leave behind. Not just the opponents, not just the critics, but the part of me that still flinched when someone said my name wrong. The part that still wondered if I was only being given this chance to look inclusive. On the part that still carried every stare, every whisper, every denial. But this time, I didn't bring that version of me to the match. I brought the girl who practiced in broken courts, who wrote on walls, who made little black girls want to play again. Because maybe that's what power really is. Not being allowed to show up, but showing up anyway. So they say every athlete has one moment that defines them. Not the medal, not the ranking, but a moment where everything aligns, not just the body, but the soul. Mine started with a voice from the crowd just before I stepped onto the court for that national qualifier. "She's here. Mommy, it's really her." I turned. It was her, the same little girl. Braids, bright eyes. This time, holding a homemade sign that read, "Too black to quit." My throat closed up, not from nerves, from clarity. This match wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving her right. When I stepped onto the court, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like an outsider. I felt like a storm that had waited too long to be heard. The announcer hesitated on my name again. I corrected him before he finished. "That's Williams, say it clearly." The opponent across the net had no idea. She wasn't just playing me. She was playing every girl I ever used to be. The match started fast. She was good, quick, controlled, sharp. But I had something she didn't. I had pain that had been repurposed into precision. I had rhythm shaped in silence. I had rage that had learned to dance. She took the first set. I didn't panic. Instead, I smiled, because I was just getting started. In the second set, I found the groove. Not the one taught by country club coaches. The one taught by bouncing balls against brick walls in the dark. By hitting serves at dawn, because you had no court of your own. Point by point, I climbed. The crowd felt it. They weren't clapping out of politeness anymore. They were reacting to something real, something raw. I looked over and saw that little girl again, standing now, mouth open, eyes wide. She was watching herself, in me. Match point, a deep serve. She returned it fast. I met it mid-air, and then the noise disappeared. Just me, the ball, and the fire. I smashed it down the line. Game, set, match. The applause was thunderous, but it wasn't the noise that moved me. It was her, running from the stands, crying, throwing her arms around me like we'd known each other forever. "You didn't let them stop you." "No," I said, holding her tight, "and neither will you." After the match, reporters swarmed, but I wasn't thinking about headlines. I was thinking about legacy, about how power looks different on every skin, and how strength isn't always loud, but it always leaves a mark. They asked me how I felt. I said, "I didn't win today for the rankings. I won for the little black girl still sitting in silence." What I didn't say was, this was only the beginning. That victory led to more matches, more stages, more eyes. But I never forgot who I was playing for. Every time I stepped on the court, I imagined her watching, and I made sure to show up fully, hair braided, voice strong, name pronounced correctly, because being too black for tennis was never the problem. The problem was the game wasn't ready, and now, I wasn't asking for readiness. I was demanding space. If you're still watching this, if you've ever been made to feel too much of something, too black, too poor, too loud, too emotional, you know this. That's your power. They don't fear your flaws. They fear your fire. So light it. Let it burn. and never ever ask permission to be great.